us all in suspense.
Yep.
Yes.
So you all probably know this, but this show was supposed to happen 2 years ago when COVID hit. And
Oh, no way.
we will have another show, the next show, I'm blanking on who it is, sorry. But
Is it Crystal?
You know, Dahlia.
Dahlia.
Dahlia's is next 2 weeks from now. So. Then next year we'll have, I think, 3 senior humorists.
That year.
Yeah.
Who will be?
Gabe, I think, is interested.
Did it Obi?
Maybe. Yeah, he's got
Yep.
Anybody know any jokes?
Did you say does anybody know any jokes?
I'm a theater, yeah. I'm a theater major, can't tell.
Really could start us off with
What's up in it, Jackie? What's up in it?
Would it be possible to move the camera a little far this way so people can come in behind?
A little further right.
Maybe that up a little bit.
Yeah, I graduated with a BFA in food performance and master, and now I'm here. I just moved to like the area, and so I'm just like, sorry.
People can come in further. There's room, so come on in.
Should I start talking or? Okay. So this is my work. A lot of it is like painted over old stuff. So there's old paintings under it, mine or other people's. Everything was kind of made at different times. Some is newer, some is older. They're all kind of different mediums too. There's prints, paintings, combination of everything. If anybody has any questions, I don't really have much more to say about the work.
Can you talk a little bit about like what things have changed? You talked about, you know, these were made at different times in different mediums and sort of address different things. Is there a kind of progression to the work? Like if you were pointing things out, this started first and then it built on, you know, you built on ideas in this set or this other set?
I mean, some of them so long ago, so it's hard to remember, but I think like these were first, and this was kind of at the same time, and then, yeah, the prints and the paintings were kind of done at similar times. I'd say this wall is like the most recent though, that I worked back into. The prints were made a while before they were like done, because I went back into them with pen and marker and tons of stuff, so yeah. I just kind of like swap back and forth, whatever I'm in the mood for really, because I work weird hours, so sometimes I'm just like, I want something easy, like I want to take all my painting stuff out and like set up my area to paint, like I'd rather just take a piece of paper and draw on it, you know. Yeah, but I'd say like these kind of influenced some of the paintings over here and vice versa, because they were just kind of going with the flow. Like I wasn't trying to make anything, I was just, you know, getting my mind off daily life, I guess. Do you have like a favorite painting? Probably this one. I made that like before all of them. I made that in Kelly's class actually. I don't know if you remember that.
I don't.
Yeah, it was like towards the end.
Yeah, man, that's really interesting because you took painting one a bit before you took, I think, intermediate and advanced.
Yeah, I
painting,
think
right?
I
Like you
took
took it your
painting
French
before
year and then there was
printmaking.
like
Yeah.
a year in between.
Well, I think this was from painting 2. So
Oh,
I
that
don't,
would
I
have
might
been
have been
my
at
class
this.
then.
Then it was painting 1, because I don't know. I remember you like walking around like while I was making this.
One thing that you have said a little bit about, and I'd like to hear you talk more about if you don't mind, is this idea of working on top of other things and like, or going back and like working back into stuff. What do you think is appealing for you about that, or what does that do for your process, or what kinds of ideas does that open up for you?
I think it's kind of like, I know it's not done yet, but I'm not sure what it needs, so I'll just set it down and come back to it, and then, you know, maybe I'm in a different mood and I just feel like scribbling over the whole thing and like starting something new. It just really depends on what I'm feeling, I guess. Because a lot of these like looked super different, and then when I went back into them, they got crazier, like the big one on the wall, like the zigzags and stuff. That looked super different. It was, yeah, and just layered tons of stuff on top of it. I guess it just kind of changes from time to time. The painting or the piece usually ends up looking different.
So are they ever done?
Yeah, like I haven't touched that in like at least a year. I wouldn't like paint on any of those either. Because like once they're done, they're done. Like I like them how they are, but if they're not done, then I'll just work on them until I feel like they're done.
So it's sort of intuitive when you know something's done.
Yeah, I guess just when it feels complete, like I can't think of the word. I guess when it's just feels full.
How do you come up with names? Does the name come first or the painting come first?
I think the name comes last. It's just kind of whatever came to mind. It wasn't anything particular, just whatever I saw in it, I guess. I feel like names are hard. When I was in school still, I'd always just be like, oh, it's untitled. But when I was working at a print shop, I noticed that names could add some more pizzazz to it, so that's when I started actually using them.
Well, I imagine the process too is pretty meditative, just because you are so engaged with the materials and engaged with the surface, and like that's really dictating what you're doing. And I imagine the path that kind of takes your brain is a much different path than if you were painting a still life, for example.
Oh, yeah.
And really having to concentrate super hard on like matching a color, or this seems to be like the title comes out of maybe where your mind happened to go, or just sort of like the resulting like association, like carnival makes like that makes sense for that painting, and
Yeah.
you know, and it certainly, like you said, enhances the meaning of the work, and kind of affirms like my interpretation of it a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about, you know, one thing I think of is like maybe in 2 years you'll look at those paintings and you'll need to activate them again or something like that. Like I really like that idea of something being finished for now as if it's fulfilled the purpose that it needs to fulfill. And then maybe later it's something that again feels unresolved, and certainly that's a feeling I can relate to just in the last few years, just like how suddenly something just shifts and needs attention that I thought was resolved.
Yeah.
And, you know, but then I think about the medium that you've chosen, like, or the media that you've chosen. You have cardboard, like a really specific kind of cardboard, and printmaking and painting. They all seem to have something to do with like adding and peeling and sticking and pulling apart. There's like a kind of a similarity between how you're handling these seemingly disparate materials and techniques and technologies that like is so closely related. I feel like the gesture is the thread that kind of ties everything together.
Yeah.
And the action, you know? But, okay, so where's the question? I don't know. What? Where's the question? Okay, so, yeah, I guess I just wonder about, like, just, yeah, kind of building on Kelly's question, like, where did this come from? This, like, it's real, like, some of these, like, you talk about the layers and layers and layers, and sometimes when work layers and layers and layers, you get some illusion of depth
Yeah.
that happens, like, especially in the blue painting on the top left,
Yeah.
and then also the, like, the red, the reddish, orangish one. There's, like, some,
There's stuff under it.
there's
yeah.
stuff that goes back, and then there's stuff that advances forward, and then others, everything is on the surface. Like, it's all about bringing everything right up to the surface. And so I kind of just wonder about, like, that process of just how you really arrived at this kind of method and this kind of process. And because as a student, I imagine you took a lot of rendering classes, like
Yeah.
where you learned how to draw and you learned how to,
Well, I think that was kind of it for me. Like,
Yeah.
Everything was about kind of making something and it being something and it having like this great depth of meaning, and that just became very overwhelming to me because I feel like everyone was like, well, what is this? Like, what do you want it to be? Like, what's behind it? And I was just like, this is a lot. So
Yeah.
it became very meditative, and I just kind of went with it. I was just trying to do whatever felt right, and sometimes it's like, oh, how can I kind of make this go against it, or how can I make it flow? You know, what's
Yeah.
going to make it more interesting to look at?
One thing that's so interesting to me, especially in the paintings, is how much they start to read like camouflage. And like something that's about sort of blending in or disappearing, right? Which I think is interesting, even though they don't do that in the context, right,
Yeah.
that they're put in. But that idea, like what camouflage is supposed to do, is interesting, but they also look like topographical maps.
Yeah.
Or like, you know, like images, sky view images, which these really, really feel like.
Mhm.
So there's also like definitely, even though they're not pictures of things, they really still feel like real experiences of stuff that's around us,
Yeah.
which, in addition to like the materials that they are, like you can't get away from what it's made of here, but
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Can you say a little bit about this? This series
Yeah.
feels much more like character driven, or
Yeah. I made like 3 of those in senior sem, and I just liked your response to them, Tim, so I thought I'd make more. We're like, these are weird, but I like them. So that's kind of why I made more. They're just like, they're not really anything, they're just kind of like made up things. I painted whatever came to mind, and then I tried to bring out whatever dried, added little more details to them.
They're, my son had Gates' favorite. I asked him what was his favorite stuff. He said that. We were talking about it. He's like, that one's a phoenix. No, it's not a phoenix. It's something else. That one's like a tree, but it's an evil tree. It's like, you know, just, it's really interesting. They feel like they're reaching in lots of fun directions. I don't know. They feel very seasonally appropriate too.
Yeah.
So Ashley, I have a question
Yes.
about size of pieces and things. So since you've been reworking into, so there's a larger painting, have you mainly been working on the smaller pieces back into those, or are you working larger, or kind of a mixture?
The larger piece was actually something I did more recently, and like the orange one, I'd say those were the 2 most recent paintings that I worked on at the same time as kind of the prints.
Okay.
So it wasn't like one size, it was kind of just whatever I was in the mood for that day.
Because those feel pretty different than the other pieces that you're
now that I showed them, I'll work back into them so they look different. Like Emily said.
That's an interesting point though. So you're saying now that you've shown them, you might work back into them.
Yeah, because they could, move on. They've served their purpose. Like you said,
Go back into
they can have a new life now.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of like that because, I think in some of the classes that we had, like you were working on some found things or maybe even the scraps of things that you were kind of giving a new life. So I think that's an interesting approach with your own work because I think there's quite a few artists that would not want to work back into it once
Yeah.
they've deemed it finished. But that idea, sort of the malleability and the changeability, that just is like an interesting concept.
Yeah, I think because these are just like sort of a meditative thing for me, like something that I can do after I've had a long day and I don't have to think about much. I can just, be taken into the work. So it's kind of nice that you can just do whatever and it works.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But there's I don't know, when, this is just like my own, trigger phrase when students say it's just this. I'm always just like, no, it's not just that. It's not just meditation. It's not just personal. It's not just therapeutic. It's also it's a record. And because it's a record of you in your environment at a time that's specific, it makes you an inextricable participant in your universe. You know what I mean? Which is very major. You know what I mean? So it's it might be just a way to process or just a way to make sense of the world, but that is actually a gigantic thing, right? That you're doing, right? And it has such gravity beyond what you're doing in private, right? The activation, right? You're activating your mind, but now that you're showing it in public, we're activated and we're joining you in this record. We're seeing a clear record of the 3 hours, but then also the 3 hours that were in the surface embedded 2 years ago, right? So especially in this time and especially in the context of you having graduated in 2019 and they're showing these now, there's just this real sense of history in the work.
That's kind of why I named it Tracing Memories, because it was all from different times and different points in my life, which I thought was interesting.
Well, and also actually too, this makes me think about printmaking and the idea of working back into things.
Yeah.
Working in stages as just part of that process. So, as you were saying, okay, this is done, I'm working back into it. As a printmaker, I'm always thinking about the block and going back to the block. The print itself is that is sort of done, but I'm going back into that and reworking it. So I think that's kind of, I don't know, you seem to gravitate towards printmaking a bit, even though your practice is pretty varied, but it may be something about the nature of that process.
Yeah.
And the working back in. So maybe that's a question I have, is that when you were at Chicago Printmaker Collaborative, were there any things that were sort of insightful about your practice, being able to work in a different space? And then the other question is that it would be, are you still connected with any of the people there?
Not super connected. They were telling me that they wanted me to keep checking in because they were gonna have a paid intern soon, but I just have been so caught up in work and just my own practice. Because I had all these prints from the shop that I made because I knew I wasn't gonna be there for a while. So I kind of stocked up really. But yeah, I'd probably go back eventually because it was a little community there and you're always meeting new artists. I met so many artists there because there's resident artists and then they have shows and you just meet tons of people and they all have different perspectives on work and then they're looking at your work and they're talking about other people's work and you're seeing shows and it's just this whole community and you're always learning something and seeing other people's art really. So it's definitely nice. So it would be nice to go back there, but I have not thought about that yet.
just something to think about, 'cause those communities kind of stay with you, and it was really exciting seeing how quickly you worked through, and just like how more invested you seemed in the process outside of classes, you know?
Yeah, I was
So,
there like every weekend, so it was definitely fun. They were always having shows and having me make stuff for them.
Actually, I have a question. At what point did you start incorporating cardboard like this? These three are probably my favorite of everything I see here. And I think it's the texture and how you put. I just wonder, when did you start doing that? Was that a part of this internship?
That was before the internship. I made those when I was living with another art major, Sam, and she actually collaborated with those with me a little bit. Like it was like me, her, and Connor Satterley, and we were just like passing them around every like 5 minutes. We'd swap, and yeah, so that was a little bit of a collaboration, and then I used those to make the prints all around those. They were before the print shop. And I just wanted to do something with them, so.
That repeating, like wing shape pattern, like just the slope, I don't know how you would describe it, but like it's so nice to see it repeated so many times, and it feels really generous because like for anyone who, like it's like kind of just a treat. Like it's like anybody who's struggling to understand abstract art or like whatever anyone's experience would be, it's this point of recognition that's repeated, and just that feels accessible. You know what I mean? Like you're building up like a familiarity. It becomes a character that I follow and want to find as all of them, you know, and it's like it's just really nice.
So for a lot of your works, it involves sort of taking pauses and then coming back to them at a later time. So I wanted to ask, have there ever been times when you've done work for yourself, something outside of a class thing that you started and then felt wasn't a good idea and didn't actually see through? And I guess going with that, like, do you think that's a thing, like a bad idea for art, or just an unfinished idea?
I'd say just an unfinished idea, because I still have some stuff that I made in like classes and stuff that I'm just like, this is just not it. I don't know how else to describe it. Like, it's not bad, it's just like, it's something I made, like it's part of the process of learning. Because a lot of those classes, like you're just like, when I was learning printmaking, it's like I didn't know how to do it, so I was just making whatever came to mind because we were learning how to carve a board, So I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it's a learning experience, because there were some things that I made in printmaking with Maya, and then I used them again later as like a base for something else, and I put something else over it. So it could really be whatever you want it to be. I don't think it's a bad idea. It needs more work maybe until you feel like it's finished.
And it's a different approach to the idea of like archiving. Like and sometimes it's like, as artists we're encouraged to like, once something is done, you like put it in glassine and you put it in a flat file and you keep it in acid-free conditions, and you know what I mean? Exactly. But then like going back into it with a new material is also an approach to archiving something, right? Like it's just adding another layer of history on top of it, and it's still there, like the past image is still there, but it's just serving, like you said, as a base for something else. And I like that kind of approach. It's also like, it seems both economical and environmentally friendly, and just to continuously reuse surfaces and
Save some money too.
yeah, exactly. Like there's other things that kind of come where my mind goes to when I think of like reworking old drawings, instead of amassing like more and more and more and more, and then where are you going to store it? And it becomes a burden at some point. You get buried in your own work.
I know I left a ton of stuff in Wilson.
It's probably been painted over by someone else, yeah. you're a legend now, right? Like it's,
Forever ingrained.
yeah.
Okay, sorry, I'm trying to figure out where this is. Did you make a painting and you had Lucy from Disenchanted?
I did, that's my.
I think I might be thinking of a painting we unstuck Lucy from the window of our apartment.
Oh my gosh! I love that for him. That makes me happy.
We got related to that show this year.
It's a good show.
I know.
Lucy's pretty cool.
Now we have Lucy on our window.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Your legacy's carried on.
I love that.
Yeah. It's like a flat Stanley or something. Like,
Yeah. I
where's
know I
Lucy
have
gonna go
people's
next?
art in my apartment from Wilson too, so it happens. You just find cool stuff there.
So like when I used to draw, I used to draw, but like I noticed that a lot of time when I look back on my drawings and stuff like that, like a lot of time when I was doing like abstract like artwork, like I feel like my mood at the time, like what I'm feeling at the time, like kind of like gives like a certain vibe to my artwork, and like through like different periods of time, like I see kind of change, and like do you see that with your artwork? Or no?
I feel like it's hard to say that unbiased because it's like, it's my art. It all kind of like, obviously I know I made it, you know. I don't know, that's a hard question. I don't really know the answer to that. No, you're fine. It's, I guess it's something to think about. I don't know. I know that my art has changed over time and it looks different. Like when I do graphic design, it looks totally different even though it's like the same kind of approach, I guess. I don't know, it's hard to say. I think art does change over time though, because my art didn't look like this before, it just kind of happened. I feel like that happens, every artist talk I went to, they're like, oh, I just kind of fell into this style, I don't know. It's kind of the same thing, I just kind of fell into this style, it just happened because of what was going on, what I was learning, and where I was. A lot of this I started making right when we had to move out of like our housing on campus, and I just moved back home and I wasn't working and I was trying to finish my classes and I was just like in my room all the time, so it was just like, it was just meditative for me. It was just something that I could take my mind off. Like I had to finish school and I was looking for work, and it was just something that calms me down really.
Yeah. What's encouraging also for our students, hearing this now, like who are kind of paralyzed by that idea of like having to develop a style, like it's good to hear that it just sort of happens, like like when you make work, there's threads that are connecting things, and then if you're paying attention and you sort of live around your work for a while,
Yeah.
you see it and you just sort of follow a thread, you know? And you're a product of your circumstances to an extent, you know, so, yeah.
I actually have a question. Have you ever used like wood as a medium?
Oh, because I was going to say there's like wood pieces on the back of this wall too.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It all started when I was in printmaking and I was like carving on wood, and I was like, this would be cool to paint on it.